Hello and welcome to Make a Difference Foundation Video 3. Thank you for joining and I hope everybody is doing great. In our last session, what we discussed was how to motivate ourselves to take action by boosting the idea of reward and suffering, how to be a psychological minded person, which is a key to solve any problem, and how to use the commitment screen so that way we can plan the roadmap to achieve success. As every one of you are unique, so take the ideas that resonate with you, implement in your life, and bring the positive change that you want for yourself. Now the key is take 10 minutes out of your day and reflect. Where am I? Where I want to go? How am I going to get there? Now, if I ask you a question, who is your best friend? Who do you talk most on every day? Many of you will say name of a friend, sibling, or a family member. But in reality, the most we talk every day is our own mind or ourselves. And it's quite surprising, but true. Our mind is our best friend. And if that friend is healthy and on our side, then nothing will stop us achieving greatness and success. So let's start learning how to manage our internal dialogue, which will give us clarity of thoughts and emotional stability. So today's topic is, am I my biggest fan or worst critic? So I'm doing this very dichotomously, so black and white, make it simple. And what I'm saying here is, when I meet people and I interact with them, I look at the relationship they have with themselves first. They either fall into two places. One, either they are their biggest fan or they become their worst critic. And it's the worst critic that I want to address here. Before you start looking at yourself and thinking, how am I going to develop myself? How am I going to change my behaviors and thinking to achieve success? You have to get on the side where you have a good relationship with yourself. And for that to happen, you have to understand in first place, why would you be a critic? If we look at this in detail, the part of the brain that is criticizing you is the impulsive part of the brain, which is doing a hijack, and it reacts using emotions, feelings, fight, flight, and freeze mode. What it is saying is, I have got to look good in eyes of everyone else, and therefore any mistake I make or anything I don't come up to perfection on, I'm going to criticize. It's its job to protect you from feeling pain and avoid uncomfortable situations. And it's really important concept, because if you keep listening to this and engage with it, then it's going to lead you to a lot of unhappiness, anxiety, and frustration, and feeling of failure. It meant to do this. What we meant to do is say, right, here is a criticism of me, or something I have achieved and not achieved. And then we as a human have a choice. Do I want to accept that and work with it, or do I want to reject it and not work with it? It's your choice. So in the biggest fan or worst critic, I'm not saying that we excuse ourselves for all the error we make. What I'm saying here is, let's have a really constructive and positive relationship with ourselves, which will help us achieve any outcome objective. One of the ways we can do this is ask a simple question. Is this going to help me? So criticizing yourself continuously and having a low self-esteem or a low opinion of yourself actually helpful and productive? Absolutely not. It's not helpful to you, and it's certainly not helpful to the people around you. We all like happy people. Now if you look at the relationship you have with yourself, the two big words I like you to think about in a reflection time is, do you respect yourself and do you accept yourself as you are? That means we get things wrong time to time. We speak out of turn, or we do an action that we regret. But that's a part of being a human being. We all do that. So if you do that, there are two ways you can manage it simplistically. You can either have a self-reprisal and condemn yourself, feel shame, guilt, and I see, some people really beat themselves up, and this is such a destructive and unhelpful thing to do. Instead, why not take an alternative way of managing yourself? So if you made a mistake, genuinely, you have done something that you regret, Maybe follow a path that is helpful and bring best out of you. Accept there is going to be disappointment. You wish you hadn't done it, wish you hadn't said it, whatever. Having accepted the disappointment, see then what can you do with that. So acceptance leads to let's have a plan now to redeem what I have done and learn from it. That's a much more constructive way of looking at it. And accept that we all make errors from time to time. It's a very important point that when we are planning and learning to manage ourselves, we have to be kind to ourselves. The operative word here is skill. It's a skill that we need to acquire, how to manage ourselves and dialogues within our mind. And it's a lifetime skill. And some days, no matter how much you practice, you can slip and get it wrong again. Be forgiving and kind to yourself. That's what my advice is. One thing I sometimes ask people is, when they say to me, what do? I have done this or that, I have said this or that, whatever it is, and being the worst critic again. What I'm asking is, give yourself advice, because my advice may not resonate with you. So I say, if you were working with someone who done that or said that, whatever it is, what advice would you give to yourself? Sometimes that's the best advice you can get, because you know yourself better than I know you. So again, accept yourself as you are, give yourself some sound advice which can be firm, because this is not an excuse technique to slip out of mistakes. It's about taking responsibility and accountability, but learning a skill and moving forward. So I just want to round this up by giving you 2 examples. I know I always take my session more in detail, but I want to make sure that you get the idea. Now, how can you turn things around? A very common scenario, when somebody's made a decision which at that time seems to be right, but afterwards, in hindsight, probably wasn't the best decision to make. Again, you can either be your worst critic and condemn yourself for making that error, or you can be your biggest fan and say, okay, why would you do that? It wasn't intentional at that time that you made any decision, whether it's a trivial one or a very serious one. You make that in a good faith. It is the right decision at that moment. We can never look forward in a crystal ball and see what's going to happen next, or what are the consequences of that. So we have to look back and say, at that moment and time, it was the right decision. Now, it turned out now not to be. You be your biggest fan and say, you made the right decision then. Now, let's see what we can do with it if it turned out not to be. But going back in time and condemning yourself is extremely unhelpful. It's not going to lead you to success. The second example I like to do is, if you imagine a child has done something wrong which is not helpful or destructive, whatever happens to be, sometimes you don't approve of. How would you manage that child? And I'm guessing most of you would probably say, you will be understanding, it's a child. Children are not quite out of the oven, so they don't quite know how to manage themselves or interact with people and the world around them. So we are a bit more forgiving. I extend that and say, adults are no different. Sometimes we just don't manage the skill of managing ourselves and figure out how to talk to ourselves. And that means we have to be a little bit more understanding, a little bit of more forgiving, and it starts with you. Self-love and self-acceptance is the key. So I'm asking you today is to reflect on this in your daily reflection time and think about it. Are you your biggest fan or worst critic? Little bit of balance, but being the biggest fan is a much better place to be. Still, be critical than being worst critic who is condemning. Think about it. Make up your mind, and thank you very much.